Good morning. I have another watermelon story for us today. Uh, we were living on the old Phillips place, and the Phillips place was a mile long. We had a drainage called Walnut Creek that came up through the place, and it forked and went one to the west and one to the east. And the house sat upon a high hill in the middle of those forks, and so we could see that full mile. We had a watermelon patch that we'd planted at the far end down next to the road. And this story takes place because Dad and I were in Blanchard one day, and the place was about halfway between Blanchard and Newcastle, Oklahoma. And we were in Blanchard and in a store, and some young high school kids that knew Dad started talking behind his back and talking loud enough he could hear them on purpose. They were saying, one was saying to the others that were there, says, "I know where there's a watermelon patch and watermelons are ripe," and says, "It's not very far." And Dad turned around to him and he said, "Boys," he says, "I have a watermelon patch." And he said, "I think most of you know where it is." He says, "Go and take all the watermelons you want." But he said, "Please leave the vines intact. Just don't mess them up, but get what melons you want. You're welcome to them." And we went on. And of a night, we could go out on the front porch sometimes and be outside at night, and you could see car lights come down the section line south of us, and they'd park and get out and go in the watermelon patch. But we never had any vines damaged or anything. There had been some people who had watermelons that the kids would go in and just destroy the patch, because if the vines will reproduce. It's interesting about watermelons. When they would first come up and start putting watermelons on, they have a little yellow flower that they put on, and then a watermelon grows behind that yellow flower. Well, we would go through, and after the watermelons were, the size of big potatoes, bigger than your fist, and you could tell which watermelons were going to be shaped well and which ones weren't. And we'd go through and we'd prune them down to 2 melons per vine in the spring. And it's interesting to me in these later years. I hadn't thought about it then, but what we tried to do was grow a 40-pound melon to sell by the time it's ripe. It's interesting that a watermelon plant will produce a 40-pound melon in just over 20 days, almost 2 pounds of melon growth per day from the time the flower drops off, and they're the size of your fist. And so we would grow those, and we provided a lot of watermelons around the country. I've told you of Jim Armstrong Company that bought most of them and peddled them through town, and it was a good time in our lives to grow the watermelons. Have one other story that I'll add with this. We had a field that was like a triangle shape, and the base of that triangle was the road going by, and the point of that triangle was maybe 250 yards away. But we had cut off that corner and we had planted watermelons in this corner strip over there. And Jimmy Ogle was a friend of Ira's and Donnie's and Denny's, and he had some friends in Oklahoma City that they had built up about going to get some watermelons somewhere, and they were wanting to scare these kids, and so they told them the story that we know where a watermelon patch is, but the man who owns it is mean, and he'll get after you with a gun or whatever. And so they had planned a time to come out to go to the patch. Well, that strip across toward the road that was a straight line, Jenny and Donnie and Ira went out there and they put posts in about every 30, 40 yards, but it was only knee high, the top of the post. And they put a staple in the top of the post, and they ran an old telephone wire through those staples down the side of the post so it crossed the entire field on that end. And Ira was at one end of it. Anyway, when they got in there that night, I was with Ira. One of the rare times that they let me go with them. But Ira pulled that wire up so that it's straight across field, about knee high, and he tied it off to a post over there. And so he was supposed to get that and then start the fun. Donnie and Denny were placed around the watermelon patch on the north side. The straight line was on the south side of the field. And so when Ira got it pulled up, he yelled out, "Now I've got you!" And of course, these boys that from Oklahoma City had never been in on a farm type thing. I mean, they were city kids. They all broke and ran. Well, they were running away from the voice, and then Donnie and Denny stood up out in front of them on the north side, shot their shotguns off in the air, and yells at them again, and they turned and they ran toward the cars. Well, of course, after they tripped over the wire and all landed face down in the dirt, everybody got up, and Donnie and Ira and Denny came out, and they were laughing, and they started counting noses. And there was one missing. These kids had run and they'd all hit the wire. We'd seen that, but there was one gone, and I know that there was some concern that maybe one of them actually had gotten shot. And so they started searching for him in the watermelon patch. Well, in the watermelon patch, we didn't, this was a little bit later in the summer, and there were some sunflowers that had grown up. And there was a sunflower out there that around the base, it was a single sunflower, around the base of it was probably 5 feet in diameter, the leaves sticking out, and the sunflower stalk itself was probably 3 or 4 inches in diameter down low like that. When we found the guy, he was in under those things, curled up around the bottom of that post. Scared him to death. He just knew that they were really going to shoot him. And anyway, some of those kind of things happened on a fairly regular basis, but that was the best one that year of scaring others from going into the watermelon patch. If you like these, I'd like to have you subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, but I like to see them and send comments to me and stories that you might like to hear. Have a good day.